Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should.
You are listening to Climate of Joy, the podcast where we talk about climate change and consciousness in light of what quantum science is telling us about reality and the dramatic opportunity for healing that the climate emergency offers. I'm Christine Penner-Polly, a self-described climate crone who is a Canadian mom of two, three if you count Jemmy, my little Frenchie Spaniel cross. I'm an author, a speaker, and an energy intuitive specializing in loosening the invisible knots that keep us stuck in unhealthy patterns at both the personal and collective level. This podcast is being recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lekwungen peoples and the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanich First Nations. Recognition and respect for these people's past, present, and future presence and caretaking of this land is essential to reconciliation. As a settler, I want to honor and thank the original peoples of this territory and also recognize that my presence here is the result of European colonization, which has had devastating impacts for the original people of this territory and right across Turtle Island.
So, April is Earth Month, and Earth Day is upon us. And it's time to celebrate a year since the Climate of Joy podcast was launched. And it's been a year of sorting out what the voice of Climate of Joy looks like after being a co-host of Earth Feels podcast for several years. It's a different experience being a solo podcaster. And so that's taken me a while. And also I have been expanding my own energy healing skills. I've just finished about 6 months of training in getting my emotion code and body code certification. So I can talk a bit more about that in a while. But in the meantime, as we know, it's Earth Day on April 22nd, celebrated every year. And I admit I've been struggling a bit because while my energy healing work is so amazing for me and many of the people that I work with feel positive results. When I look around at what is going on in the greater world, it's very, very concerning. Climate-wise, there's more and more, even more alarming news about the lines that we are crossing, the pollution lines, the extinction lines. And meanwhile, total chaos seems to be happening in the United States and their political system. Here in Canada, the situation is not quite as bad, but it is still very, very concerning because Justin Trudeau, while there were great hopes that he would be a climate hero and have integrity, his integrity is rightly being questioned by a lot of Canadians. And wow, it's hard to imagine the Liberals mishandling, because we have a federal Liberal government, mishandling the climate file any more than they have. And, you know, they did the right thing. They put a price on climate pollution because you price things that or you tax things that you don't want more of. And that was the right thing, but their messaging has been so bad. And in fact, calling it a tax isn't even accurate because 80% of Canadians get more of the money back in rebates than they actually pay. But somehow the federal conservatives are managing to paint this as a money grab, and while completely denying climate change and not having any plan to address it, they're backing Trudeau into a corner somehow because he just can't get his messaging right. And I mean, it is an uphill battle. And certainly 10 years ago, it was hard to be as honest as politicians need to be now, as we are hurtling towards breaking so many important climate milestones.
At the same time that the provincial government in Alberta is fighting tooth and nail against the federal government's price on carbon pollution, also declared Alberta wildfire season open 10 days early this year in February instead of usually it's March 1st because of low snowfall and unusual dryness predicted for this year.
And there's so many Canadians that are so concerned about climate change, but somehow Trudeau and his government are completely tone deaf on that. So very, very disappointing. And Mr. Polyev, the conservative leader who is such a political insider, he's done nothing but be a professional politician for decades, is somehow painting himself as a man of the people, going to save people from the elites when he in fact is an elite. All right, so that's my rant. And here we are talking about climate of joy, but I guess I'm getting a little bit off track. So that's kind of the backdrop. And also, of course, the terrible, terrible conflict in the Middle East and the conflict in Ukraine, where innocents are suffering. And so I've been struggling a little bit to balance my connection with the world beyond the five senses and the world of the five senses, which is so discouraging right now. And I just want to send a big shout out and thank you to my good friends, Linda and Sandra, who are energy healers extraordinaire.
You've met Sandra before on earlier episodes of Climate of Joy.
And both of them have reminded me recently that my connection to the world beyond the five senses, beyond the three-dimensional world that we take as reality, is a gift to the world. And I need to remember that. And so I have a rather unique perspective on the climate crisis, and I need to talk about that more. So thank you, Sandra and Linda, for that reminder. And so here we go. What are we going to talk about on Climate of Joy today? Now that I've ranted, I'm going to jump right into what happened earlier this week, a devastating event happened to a friend of mine and her family.
They lost a loved one very suddenly and very young.
Very tragically. And it was just having just spoken with her a couple of days earlier in a support group that we're both a part of. And one of the women in that group is a death doula,
whom longtime listeners will have met on episode 3 of Climate of Joy, Finding Joy and Healing When Facing Death.
So we were talking about planning, making sure that we are clear about what our plans are for when we're not here anymore. I've taken a book out of the library called If I Get Hit by a Bus. The subtitle is, what to do for when you're no longer around. And so we were talking about death, and then it happened the next day for her. So it's one thing to talk about it theoretically, and it's another thing for it to come home so dramatically in this situation. And so my heart just went out to her and her family. And of course, any of us who have lost anybody we love know how devastating grief is. And as I was thinking about this friend and her family the day that I heard about it, I was grieving myself, obviously not in the same way that she is, but it was very distressing for me. So just even to get through the day that day, when I had tasks that I needed to accomplish, I had clients to see, I found myself needing to focus very much on just the simple tasks that were in front of me whenever I could. And so I and I confess I don't have a great fondness for housework in general. I like to keep my house looking fairly presentable, but I'm not that crazy about it. But I found myself getting out the vacuum, cleaning the bathrooms, cooking and baking in between my more structured time in the day. Whenever I had downtime, I found that I couldn't sit, but that I had to just focus on very simple tasks that were not that complicated, that I could do kind of mindlessly, but also kept me focused. And why am I bringing this up on my podcast? Well, because for me, there is very much a link between climate change and grief. It's one of the reasons I believe that we have such a hard time acknowledging what we're doing to the planet with our human activities is because it's so overwhelming at a very deep level that we would be cutting off, destroying, um, polluting, condemning the earth, which gives us life, gives us fresh water, gives us food, that we would be basically cutting off the knees, this source of our sustenance. And without fresh water, without food, without clean air, we obviously can't survive. And yet, here we are barreling off a cliff, and Pierre Poilievre is managing to convince Canadians that the general cost of living increases all due to the fact that we have to pay a climate tax, which is in fact rebated to us. So people, it seems to me in this time, and not surprisingly, because there's so much going on, like life is really difficult right now. We are being slammed by cost of living increases. The whole COVID, the pandemic, shook up our economy, shook up our society, and we haven't recovered from it yet. We don't have a new normal. And so, vultures, frankly, like politicians who don't have a vision for where we're going, but just want to profit off of people's pain and despair, and pick a convenient scapegoat, which Justin Trudeau is, they are not at all interested in tackling the real issues of our time, which are climate change, which are pollution in general, plastic pollution, is economic disparity. I mean, Canadians, and again, I'm speaking as a Canadian, I don't have the international numbers off the top of my head, but Canadian taxpayers give almost 5 billion, that's billion with a B, not an M, per year in subsidies to the oil and gas industry, which is one of the richest industries on the planet. And so people are complaining about paying a carbon tax, which gets rebated, and yet somehow big oil and gas is getting off scot-free. And grocery stores, Loblaws, which is a big grocery chain in Canada, their profits increased by over $5 million. Sorry, by over $500 million last year. So people are stressed, and there's politicians taking advantage of that and not having the courage and the vision to give us the answers and the leadership that we need in this time of great change and climate emergency. And people like simple answers. I mean, I hesitate to use this example, but I am going to point out that the Second World War happened because in Germany, after the First World War, when they suffered humongous economic hardships after they lost the First World War, Hitler showed up and had his scapegoats handy, and we know who that was. So we should be really, really wary of people playing us, giving us easy answers for this time. And what else did I want to say? I'm rambling, aren't I? My apologies. But I guess if you're dealing with grief, I'm going to do some tapping on grief at the end of this because EFT tapping is a really good way to move stuck emotion. And if you're at all tuned in to what's going on with pollution, plastic pollution, with our increasingly acidic oceans, with the climate emergency, you will be feeling grief. And so I guess having just had a little, much more personal glimpse into grief this week than I usually do, I wanted to share that it's not surprising that people focus on what's right in front of them when we're being traumatized at so many levels. We're being traumatized economically, being traumatized by the violence that we see in the news and in our TV shows, being traumatized by the fact that we are destroying our planet. And it's kind of important to humanity to have fresh air, fresh water, and food. And I just want to say that if you look at the headlines these days, and they're not generally talking about the real issues, are they? They're talking about Trump's latest court case. They're talking about, the shenanigans in whatever provincial or state legislature or federal house, whether it's in Washington, D.C., or here in Canada in Ottawa, or whichever country you are, talking about those kind of shenanigans. And really, there's so much going on that we have. It's very hard to acknowledge all the wheels that are coming off of the bus that we're on. And it's easy to think if we don't talk about it that it's not happening. But that's not what we do here at Climate of Joy. So I would welcome your input on what you do when you start to feel overwhelmed by grief. I confess, other than being really busy with my energy healing practice these days and family, because I have a new grandbaby out there, that I've been indulging in reading very entertaining and well written, I will say, but steamy historical mysteries slash romances written by Grace Burrows, Burrows. The Lord Julian series is what got me sucked in, but this woman is an amazingly prolific writer. And so if you want some good escape literature and you don't mind some steamy scenes, I highly recommend Grace Burrows. But yeah, how do you cope? Please send me an email, message me on Instagram or Facebook.
So before I jump into tapping, let's celebrate some good news on the climate front and on the planet Earth front. Suzanne Simard, author of Finding the Mother Tree, a British Columbian, teaches at the University of British Columbia, has just been named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people for the past year. So that's very exciting because Dr. Simard talks about trees communicating with each other, and it offers us a different perspective on the world. Another thing to celebrate, the BC government and the Haida Nation have signed a really precedent-setting deal, shifting ownership and jurisdiction of the land from the Crown to the Haida Nation. And the president of the Council of Haida Nation said the agreement represents a step away from the harmful impacts of colonization on the land and people of Haida Gwaii. So great news. Also, because these are all BC stories, so local to me, I'm in the middle of reading Medicine Wheel for the Planet, A Journey Towards Personal and Ecological Healing by Dr. Jennifer Grenz, who is also, like Dr. Suzanne Simard, a professor at UBC. And it has been sitting on the Globe and Mail bestsellers list for the past couple of weeks. So lots to celebrate. And stick around if you want to do some tapping on grief with me. If you'd rather have a visual so you can see the tapping points that I'm tapping along, there'll be a link in the episode description below. Thanks for sticking around, and let's jump right into it.
As always, if you choose to tap along with me, you're welcome to, but take responsibility for your own well-being. EFT tapping is a powerful healing tool that helps to move stuck emotions, and you're welcome to rinse and repeat the tapping that I do as many times as you want. And you are, again, taking responsibility for your own well-being. Okay, so take a big breath. Feel your body wherever you're sitting, in a chair, maybe with your feet on the ground. Say thank you to the earth for all she's given you today. Fresh air, fresh water, the food in your belly. And connect to the sky, to universal energy, and say a thank you to the gifts we get from the universe. And with your next breath, just feel those two energies mixing in your body. And now we're going to start tapping. And I guess we're going to start with a setup phrase. And you'll usually do a setup phrase by tapping what's called the karate chop point. So you take your two hands together and you tap the sides of your hands together where your little fingers are. And as you're tapping there, you're just going to say, I'm willing to love and appreciate myself, even and maybe especially when I'm feeling sad. Even though I'm feeling grief at times and it may become overwhelming, I still love and appreciate myself. And I accept all of my feelings about everything. Okay, and you're saying that as you're tapping yourself on the side of the hand, and then take one or both of your hands. It's hard to do the top of your head with both hands. So just take one hand, doesn't matter which one, and you can switch them anytime. Tap on the top of your head and just say, all this grief. Sometimes it feels overwhelming to be human and to feel so sad about things I can't change. Big breath, and then tapping on the inside of the eyebrows. All this grief in my body, I'm just acknowledging it now. And for those of you who haven't tapped with me before, haven't worked with me before, when I start to cough, it means I'm moving energy. So either mine or somebody who's listening to this. So you're welcome. If it's yours, tapping on the side of the eye. It's kind of that bony area right on the side of the eye. And this is a tapping point where it's good to talk about anger, even rage. Sometimes I want to rage at the world because it's so unjust. Things happen to me, things happen to other people. That is so unjust. Okay, and now we're going to go down underneath the eyes, and it's that bone just kind of underneath your pupils. All this grief, all this sadness. I'm just acknowledging it. And that's the thing with tapping. You're just acknowledging what's there. You're not pretending everything's great. You're acknowledging whatever you're feeling. And then tapping underneath the nose. All of this grief in my system and in the world around me. Tapping on the chin, that's just kind of the cleft point underneath your lips. I'm acknowledging the grief that I'm carrying about, and you can list now specific things if you want. And you can list some more about the climate emergency, about young people dying before their time, about the innocents dying in the wars that are being waged. And now go down to your collarbone points, find your collarbones, and then find the soft point underneath, and you can tap or rub all this grief in my body, all this grief in the world. I'm acknowledging what's there. Can't change what I don't acknowledge. Okay, now the next point is underneath your armpits. So if you're a woman, it's where your kind of where your bra strap is. Just tapping. You can do it kind of monkey style. So you're tapping underneath the same arm that your hand is, or you can cross your arms over your chest and tap underneath the opposite armpit that way, whichever feels more comfortable. I'm going to do it this way, and I'm just going to say all of this pain and grief that I experience been accumulating, pain and grief in my body. Now, tapping underneath your ribs, so much I can't change. So much I'd like to change, but I can't. Sometimes it's hard for me just to get through the day. Now we're going to do a bit of tapping on the gamut point, which is on the back of your hand, the fleshy part between your little finger and your fourth finger. You find that just kind of slide down until you're in kind of a fleshy spot in between in the back of your hand. That's in a significant acupressure point or acupuncture point. We're going to tap there. And we're going to look straight ahead while we're tapping. And again, doesn't matter which hand, and you can switch hands whenever you want. Tapping on the gamut point, look straight ahead and close your eyes and open your eyes. And then still tapping on that point, look, keeping your head facing straight ahead, but move your eyes down and look down to your right, and then back straight ahead and down to your left, and then move them back. So your eyes are looking forward. Just keeping in mind this, what we're tapping on, this grief that we've been talking about. And now keep on tapping on that gamut point. Look ahead and then move your eyes up to the ceiling and then all the way around in a circle until they're back up at the ceiling, and then move them all the way around in a circle in the other direction, back to the top, and then look straight ahead. And now you're going to hum a tuneless little tune. And I apologize, I'm going to as well. And you can do it longer if you want, but we'll just do. That's the idea. Just do that a little longer. You're engaging different parts of your brain when you hum. And now, again, to engage a different part of your brain, count up by twos, starting at 0, and count out loud up to 50. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And I'm going to do the rest quietly because you don't need me counting. You know how to count up to 50. Okay, and now hum a little tuneless tune again. Keep humming. You're engaging that different part of your brain. Okay. Now take a big breath. And then take your hand, your right hand, and put it over your chest area. Then I want you to take your hand and move it down on the left. And you're going to move it in a circle. You're going to move it across and up on the right. And then it's called a heart massage. And say to yourself, I love and accept all of my feelings about everything. Okay, you can do that for a little longer if you want. Take a big breath. Tune into how you're feeling. Has your grief level gone up a little bit? Has it gone down? Is it the same? And this recording is here for you to use as many times as you like. Thank you for tuning in to the Climate of Joy podcast, where paradoxically, we talked about grief today. And I did rant a bit. But I do love the excerpt from the poem Desiderata, written by Max Ehrmann, because a part of me that tunes into the world beyond the five senses knows this is true. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you are ready for more peace in your life, even in the climate emergency, head over to climateofjoy.com to grab your free copy of Tap into Peace. Till next time, be kind to each other. Remember, we are all just walking each other home.